give people 1 more minute to join and then we'll get going. All right, we'll get started. Thanks so much to all of you who have joined our webinar this evening. My name is Molly McKinley. I work with Bicycle Colorado. I'm a grassroots advocacy manager, so I do some of our policy work in Denver, and I also support our statewide policy work. But when I started at Bicycle Colorado, I was doing our bicycle friendly driver program, which is how I got to know all of these awesome folks in Colorado Springs. I got to work with lots of different organizations all around the state, and I spent a lot of time in Colorado Springs working with them, and I'm really excited for y'all to get to meet them and hear their stories this evening. Just a few logistical information items before we get some introductions from our DCS folks. I'll be moderating this evening, but Jack will be doing all of the legwork and managing the chat and the Q&A function, so you can ask questions, and either one of those will have some question and answer segments during our time, and hope to get to as many questions as we can this evening. I will turn it to Cully for introductions.
Thanks, Molly, and thanks to Bicycle Colorado for helping us put this on. We're super excited to present what Bike Colorado Springs is doing. So for introductions, I'll start first. So my name is Cully Red-Villas. I'm the communication chair for Bike Colorado Springs. I've been involved with Bike Colorado Springs since the beginning in 2015. I moved to Colorado Springs from Chicago in 2012, where I used a bike as my main form of transportation. When moving here, I realized while the trails and recreational culture are amazing, the culture of using a bike to get around wasn't nearly where it was in Chicago. So my personal goal in helping Bike Colorado Springs is to help make that culture shift to a city that embraces bicycles as transportation.
Awesome, thanks, Coley. My name is Joan Stang, and I'm the education chair. Well, what prompted me to volunteer with Bike Colorado Springs? Back in 2012, I was hit by a distracted driver. Frustrated that the driver got off scot-free, I knew I had to do something to turn my experience into something positive. So in 2017, while attending a Bicycle Colorado Summit, I heard about a driver's education program called Bike Friendly Driver, which was started in Fort Collins. My husband and I decided to attend the class, and after that, I knew I had to help Colorado Springs launch the class. I volunteered to help organize a handful of bike-friendly driver classes taught by Bicycle Colorado as part of the Road to Zero Deaths grant back in 2018, and afterwards stepped in to act as education chair in November of last year. And I'll tell you more about Bike Friendly Driver a little later in the webinar.
Should I just jump in? Hi, this is Carlos Perez. I am the committee chair for the outreach. I started with Bike Colorado Springs with the research debacle. I was the organizer behind Friends of Research when that project got put in. Unfortunately, it was a disaster as far as bike advocacy is concerned. I have been involved in bike advocacy since that project. But since then, I've moved over to outreach because I think it's very important that we build a culture that accepts bicycling as a way of being able to get around, to stay healthy and enjoy our wonderful city. And I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Let's go to Jerry next.
I'm Jerry White. I'm a physicist by trade and a volunteer for Bike Colorado Springs for probably about 4 years. I'm the chair of the advocacy committee. And I'm pleased to say I've been a member of Bicycle Colorado probably for about 2 decades. I ride a bike to get around in Colorado Springs, and my motivation, my goal for the work with Bike Colorado Springs is to reflect my experiences in the 70 to 80 cities that I've ridden my bike in the US, Canada, and Europe. And I've seen the best of what's out there, and I want Colorado Springs to have that as well. Corey?
Yeah, hello, I'm Corey Satella, and please let me know if you're having trouble hearing me. I'm actually outside. I can move if needs be. I've lived in Colorado since 2004, and I've been a recreational cyclist most of my life, starting through road and track racing and later mountain biking. I'm currently the director of Medicine Wheel Trail Advocates, which is the local mountain bike trail advocacy organization. And my interest in Bike Colorado Springs began with seeking safe ways for me personally to get to trails, preferably without having to get in a car. So in 2015, along with Cully and Alan and Andrew and several others and Tosk,
I think we lost you a little bit, Corey.
Yeah.
Can you hear us? He's moving again. We lost you, Corey.
I'm sorry. I think, was I saying I helped to start Bike Colorado Springs, and I've been involved with advocacy issues ever since then, and we'll hear more about those in a few minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So we'll get started with a little bit of background on Bike Colorado Springs and kind of an overview of their work. So I'll turn that over to Cully.
Thanks, Molly. So at Bike Colorado Springs, we know that Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak region are amazing places to ride the bike. Our goal at Bike Colorado Springs is to make it even better. And we make sure everybody locally and outside of our region knows that riding a bike in the shadow of Pikes Peak is amazing. So this is our mission, making bicycling better in the Pikes Peak region. By successfully fulfilling these objectives, which will loosely shape the activities of the committees and the people you just heard from. So advocating for safe and connected on and off street infrastructure, teaching people how to access and safely use our bicycle network, uniting businesses, organizations, and individuals who embrace bicycling, and celebrating the strength of a community that pedals. So how did Bike Colorado Springs come to be? So coming from Chicago, I knew that having a good organization advocating for the needs of bicyclists, what it could bring to a city. In Chicago, that was the Active Transportation Alliance. In Colorado Springs, we didn't have anything like that when I moved here. So while Colorado Springs had great trail advocacy organizations, mountain bike advocacy organizations, Medicine Wheel, and multiple teams and clubs, Colorado Springs didn't have an organization to deal with the local government and on a broad range of bicyclist needs. So what we did have were individual advocates. In 2015, the leadership of the Trails and Open Space Coalition, as well as individual advocates, club leaders, local cycling industry representatives, were invited to a table to organize a bicycle advocacy organization for our region. Everybody at the table recognized the need for a united voice for bicyclists in the Pikes Peak region, and that all these individual and groups coming together united will make conditions better for all of us, not just the lycra clad that Colorado Springs, home to USA Cycling, the Olympic Training Center, and the US Olympic Committee, is pretty well known for. So while we represent the Pikes Peak region as a whole, it was a deliberate decision for us to call ourselves Bike Colorado Springs. As the largest municipality in the region, we felt that it was the best way to engage with local organizations, governments, and it's easier for people outside our city to find information if they want to ride in the region. So our mission that we decided on that I just read you above is a little bit refined from what we came to originally in 2015. We originally started out wanting to be the home of all things bikes in Colorado Springs, which is great, if not a little ambitious for an organization that just formed and has limited resources and no volunteers. So in 2017, we reworked our mission to be what you see it today. And we believe it better defines the goals that we are trying to achieve and better focuses the scope of Bike Colorado Springs. So Bike Colorado Springs was originally formed under Trails and Open Space Coalition. Bike Colorado Springs was a program of Trails and Open Space Coalition, and with bikeways being a big part of Trail and Open Space Coalition's mission, and it was a driving force behind the creation of Bike Colorado Springs. It was our natural choice to be under them to start. They were a great organization to find our feet and help guide us, as they were an established nonprofit in our community for over a decade. I don't actually know how long. That being said, Tusk was never intended to be the forever home of Bike Colorado Springs. And while still related to Tusk, Bike Colorado Springs is no longer officially a program of Trails and Open Space Coalition under their structure. That changed in June of this year as we officially moved to a financially sponsored initiative of the Trails and Open Space Coalition. This allows Bike Colorado Springs to be more driven by our own mission versus needing to adhere to the mission of Tusk, while allowing us to become more self-directed and autonomous. And this allowed us to transition to a new, more flexible structure without needing to manage our own 501c3. Tusk continues to lend its support, and we are very synergistic organizations. We will continue to partner with Trails and Open Space Coalition where our missions do align. Now, let's get into what we've achieved. And to start, let's address the elephant in the room, Research Parkway. If you know one thing about bicycle advocacy in Colorado Springs, this is it, unfortunately. Research Parkway, if you don't know about it, great. That's how we want to keep it. But it's a big part of our coming of age. Research Parkway was a road diet demonstration project proposed by Colorado Springs Traffic Engineering. It is a 6-lane arterial road, as you can see here, located in Northeast Colorado Springs, and has been developed in a very suburban, auto-centric way, as many of the outskirts of Colorado Springs have been. The city had a major speeding problem on this road, and when crashes happened, they were bad. Based on the data, 6 lanes with acceleration and deceleration lanes were excessive for this area. So to slow traffic, the city would diet the road to 4 lanes, which you see here, and the unused roadway would become large buffered bike lanes. Once installed, there was an uproar, and the demonstration project that was supposed to go for 9 months ahead of a repaving project ran for less than 3 months from October through December. While this was not the outcome we wanted from the process, we learned a few things in the first year of existence as Bike Colorado Springs. This allowed us to engage with some supporters who weren't our usual suspects and taught us how to better engage and communicate with city staff. We also learned a tough lesson about political capital and when it will be used. While research was the biggest learning opportunity, and the adoption of the bicycle master plan was the biggest success for bicycling in Colorado Springs. Bike Colorado Springs was a stakeholder in the year-long development of this plan and used its resources to promote the months-long public process surrounding this plan. If you see in that bottom right corner, that's our friend Lucy. She spoke at City Council in support of the Bike Master Plan. And we think it was her, maybe not alone, but her that helped us get to a unanimous passing of this plan by City Council in January of 2018. Now that it's adopted, this plan acts as a guide for all future infrastructure development throughout the city. This is the first update to any bicycle master plan in Colorado Springs since 1996. So of the master plan chapters, number 2 is creating greater support for bikes. And it speaks directly to culture. And as I said before, making a shift in culture is my motivation for being involved with Bike Colorado Springs. The first sentence of chapter 2, a great bicycling city includes many elements, residents who are supportive and positive about bicycling. Bike Colorado Springs is also called out as a direct partner for some aspects of this section, this community section of the master plan, which Carlos will get to a bit later. Now, chapter 3 is speaking to building connection. Chapter 3 is building connections, and chapter 4 is applying the best solutions. So this is more speaking to the engineering and infrastructure aspects. And I've included in the background what came out of chapter 3, which is the vision network, which defines where we need bicycle infrastructure to make our city more well connected. And if you look at the bottom, downtown, southeast, and trails, those are our focus areas. So while the bike master plan doesn't call out these directly, we worked with, in the constraints of what the bike master plan called out as some priority areas, and downtown, southeast are some of those key priority areas. And then we believe that focusing our resources on all 3 of these, trail connections, downtown, and the southeast, is the best use of our resources to make a positive change in Colorado Springs. So with this, I'm going to move over to the advocacy folks. And Molly.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cully. I love hearing the history of different bike advocacy organizations, and it's so funny that many of them start with well, I moved from this one place to this other place and realized there was this gap, and so I worked to start something. I love that story, and if you're joining us from a different part of the state with a small bike advocacy organization, I'd love if you could throw it in the chat. I'd love to know who's here from what part of the state. But as you do that, I'm going to turn it over to Corey and Jerry, who are going to talk to us a little bit about the advocacy work, what's going